6:30 now, and I think we can kick off, right? And hi Jeff Chandler, great to see
Hello.
you. Glad you joined. I think tonight
Hello,
is
how are you?
very well, very well. So, and Bob Blacken.
Bob Lakin. I'm
Lakin,
an
I'm
out.
so sorry.
I actually have a Hinkley 41, and I'm calling in from Marblehead.
Oh, okay. Beautiful, beautiful place up there in Marblehead. Did some J24 sailing. The Nationals were out of there racing. And we have Ed Strode that just joined as well. So let's get started. And man, are we going to have a big agenda tonight? We're going to have all sorts of topics going on. So we're going to keep things pretty tight and moving pretty fast. If we get a little bit over, I have a little tip spell here. I can just say like when we're a minute out before we change topics. So if you guys are cool with that, we can kind of get started. First, I'd like to have Jeff, Jeff, our Commodore, say a few words if he'd like to kind of address everyone for this month's meeting.
What I'd like to do is just thank you, Kristen, for organizing this. You've just done a super job, and I really appreciate your keeping up your enthusiasm for doing this. And it's really an extraordinary little handout we have for the meeting today. And I don't know what we can do to keep you at it, but I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. That's really nice. And it doesn't take much because I seriously have a blast planning for this. This is kind of a refreshing thing for me to do outside of my own work. So I am very, very honored to be able to have the opportunity to do this. So thank you. Thank you so much. So with that, hello, we're going to go through a quick, agenda, walk through what we're going to cover tonight. And then we're going to go straight into introductions, and we're going to have Peter start. But first, we're just going to break our time down. Welcome, hello. Once we jump in, we're going to start with Mariana after the introductions to go over some of the survey results. You probably recall the members have received a survey in February timeframe. And then we have 3 core topics that we'll spend, about 10-15 minutes each, plus or minus. We have a lightning round topic. I think I mentioned the bell. I can ding that if we think we're going to go a little over. We're trying something new. We have actually 6 planned panelists tonight as opposed to 3. So that's going to make it, we're going to see how challenging that is. And then we're going to see if we do have time for the Jeopardy, where we're going to try to beat our first session and try to ask as many questions where the audience gets to ask 1 minute for a question that's on the board, and a panelist has 2 minutes to answer the question or pass it off to someone else. So with this agenda, we're going to run it pretty quickly. I think you all know Jeff and Mariana. So I'm going to start with introductions, actually with Peter, if you'd like to share a little something about yourself with the members.
Sure. Penny and I live in Severna Park, where we've been for about 25 years. Prior to that, we lived in Houston and Boston and San Diego and other places. We bought Firefly about 11 years ago when we retired from racing our Catalina 27. We have 3 boys who love to go sailing with us, and now that their kids are older, they'll be back out on the boat some more. Firefly was originally purchased by a friend of Penny's dad, and we bought it from him. She was delivered the same month that Penny was. I won't tell you the year, you can look it up. So I'm a naval architect by training. I'm an engineering manager by profession, and that's it.
Great. No, thank you so much, Peter. Patrick, one of our West Coast constituents.
Yeah, I live in Dana Point, California. It's a very small harbor here in Southern California. Had the boat for about 8 years. I bought it from Orange Coast College. It was a donated boat, and it's 69. It was a little worse for wear when I purchased it, but it's been fun bringing it up to its old glory, and just enjoyed learning about the boat, on my own, and also through this great format here.
It's so great to have you here, and truly, and we look forward to your presentation on cruising. Actually, Mariana, I'm going to turn back to you and ask your introduction. Mariana's, she's like a sister to me. We're both naval daughters, and we're both got into racing a lot, sailboat racing. But now, Mariana?
Sure. I'll be quick. I'm Mariana Lesher. I'm serving as Secretary Treasurer for this group and have been. Pete and I, my husband Pete, who can't be here tonight, and I jointly own Esperanza. It was 1963 custom, y'all. And he would quickly say that I own her, although his name's on the titles and such. We inherited Esperanza from my parents, Barry and Virginia Albert, who some of you who have been around for long enough with the association might remember. My father was actually a past Commodore of this association before he got sick, and my mom served in, I don't remember, some secretary treasurer or whatever. I'm really not following in their footsteps. I just happen to have their boat. So when my father passed first, and then when my mom passed away, we looked at each other and said, well, I guess it's time to do this boat ownership, like big boat ownership. We have skiffs and things like that, instead of the other people's boat program that we had been blissfully part of for quite some time. Actually, as a matter of fact, the reason my parents ended up with Esperanza, which they bought in 1998, was because Pete and I had been racing on a B40 here in St. Michael's. That B40 was called Pagan at the time. That B40 is now in Chicago, Con Decoro, with Hunter, who isn't here yet. So there's this kind of an interesting thing. But when my parents were looking for their retirement boat, we nudged them. We nudged them to the B40 after the Dickerson 35. So they didn't have a Dickerson. They were looking at that as well. So that's my history here.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that, Mariana. I thought I knew everything about you, about not everything.
So we're still,
you.
We've had the boat now, like it's been ours. Mom passed in September of 2014. And we're still kind of learning things.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I still go back to that manual that my dad, like we have several copies of it for some reason.
Yeah.
My dad has written in it, and we still go back to that.
Wow. Well, there's been demand for that for sure. So we're going to ask David. David, great to have you on, and another West Coast constituent. So David, a little something about you.
All right. Hi, everybody. David Bell. I'm in Marina del Rey, and sailing the Glory B. You can see her there on the picture there, the Navy Blue Hull. And I purchased her in 2014 from a club member at Cal Yacht Club where I am. And she was painted forest green. I should say hull number 37, built in 1964. She was forest green when I got her, and I just preferred the flag blue. Changed the name. It used to be Nor'Wester, and that's Glory B. I've been through a couple of name changes, so I didn't feel too bad about doing that. And I've just been having a blast. This is a great place to sail. It's the weather is great. We're out 60 or 70 days a year at least, almost every weekend with a whole bunch of people. And the weather is very predictable, especially in the summer. You know, it's beautiful. They turn the wind on at noon, and they turn the wind off around 6.
Well, I have to say, David, we're a little bit jealous here on the East Coast that you have pretty much all year round sailing, and we have sailing season.
Yeah.
Just a quick intro, on my end, Kristen Gant-Applin, my husband wasn't able to be here tonight, but it's funny, David, you mentioned you painted your green boat blue, and we have Elixir, which I purchased, let's see, 3 years ago, and has only been in the water for maybe a total of 8 months.
Oh.
due to various things. But anyway, she's jade green or duck teal, as they call it, a green hull. So we're keeping her green, but no, that's great. So if we can move on to the next thing, I think the topics tonight are going to be very interesting. We're going to just jump right in, if that's okay. And David, certainly we want to hear more about your sailing experiences and everything when we get to the cruising. But I'm going to hand it off to Mariana. We're going to start with going over some of the survey results, and we're going to, tighten this up. I think most of you have seen this survey request that came out, and many of you responded. So we have actually, thanks to Mariana's skills at analytics and PowerPoint, was able to put together this for us. So I'm going to hand it to Mariana to talk through some of the results from the membership survey. Mariana?
Sure. Thank you. And I'm looking over at a different screen, which is where the results are. So it's not because I'm not focusing on you guys, but I need to look at the results. So some of you might remember, or all of you might remember, we sent the survey out and a few reminders afterwards after our annual meeting. It was prompted by our annual meeting and the executive board meeting that immediately followed as a debrief to say, let's ask some more questions. Let's try to get more of a pulse on our membership and on a couple of different topics. And what I wanted to highlight today, and I mean, the full results are available for anybody who wants, and we only essentially had 16 respondents, but that's all right. We're going to revisit these questions probably throughout, maybe send it out again. But I wanted to focus on a couple of the specific items, especially as they relate to why we're sitting here tonight, and why you've been able to join in with these forums the last couple of times. We said, well, what kind of activities are we really interested in as an association? This really ended up being about the boats and how much we share with each other about the boats, and who's doing which project, and what are the challenges, and what happens when this breaks, and things like that. So that's where you can see on the left-hand side there, the destination cruises, which is kind of how the association started, with getting together, having rendezvous. Of course, those were focused on the Chesapeake, but even so, they were always, you would go to either somebody's house, or you would go to a location as a group. And then the second thing that came up as a response was ad hoc virtual meetings. And so that's what spawned these tech forums. We talked about it. We said there's such a wealth of information here. And the survey, that's what showed up really high there. Let's see what we can do. And as you can see, they've been enormously successful. And I know that Kristen's getting all kinds of messages for driving that train. Raft ups and social get-togethers kind of come along with destination cruises. So you can see the themes emerging here. Racings, there are, I think, some of us that might race, and some of us that are just like, nope, I'm just going to enjoy the cruising part. I'll have to admit that the racing part is getting less and less of interest to us, because the last year has been just about relaxing. The other thing that we wanted to focus on, or we asked about, was what about membership recruitment? We've had mostly B40s in our membership, but we do have some Pilot 35s, and welcome to the newest one. And the Pilot 35s, in terms of vintage and age and frankly build, are very similar to B40s. So there's a lot of synergy there, even with construction and such. So overwhelmingly, though, let's start with the B40s. And I know we've done a couple of different things to reach out, and you can tell we've got people from not sure about every time zone, but close, sitting here. And with that kind of comes along it doesn't make it, the folks in California aren't necessarily going to do, an around the country cruise to the Panama Canal to come join those of us on the East Coast. And likely we wouldn't go back over there to do similar. So maybe we take advantage of the fact that we have these regional pockets of members and focus on, getting activities for the B40s and affiliates in those different regions. Obviously, we wouldn't exclude folks if you happen to be on the West Coast or the East Coast. So those were definitely strong yeses on the membership, or strong tendencies on the membership recruitment and the regional fleets, and then the activities led to these tech forums. So that's what I wanted to highlight. You know, there were some comments in there about specifics. So that's where we have started. We figured we had the forums we had the energy for, and there was certainly an energy in the membership to start thinking about how to organize activities regionally.
Mariana, thanks. That was extremely well covered. And I want to share 2 examples of how this kind of change in tact has worked this year. And I'm going to call, James McCarney and his expectation to go out to the California charter boat, but tapping into David and Patrick and John Sovereign to ask about how would I even approach sailing to Catalina. That's one thing. And then the second thing is, if we are able to establish captains, such as on the West Coast or in Chicago, or up north, Maine to Boston, kind of Nantucket area, and then we have our New York and Buzzards Bay constituent. We have our Chesapeake, we have the Florida, we have North Carolina and Georgia. Like slowly, kind of have people who might be interested in stepping up and just organize some of these things you see on the left side, destinations or whatever, with folks that are in your areas. So with that, Jeff, any other comments about the feedback we got from the survey, or Mariana's comments or mine?
No, we'll be, based upon the very positive response, I think we'll be attempting and presenting a bylaws revision to the group, attempting to establish these fleets. And we, among ourselves, and we'd love to get any feedback from anyone as far as how many fleets, where they, what they should be describing, whether it should be a New England fleet in New York, New Jersey. We can't have too many. Well, we could, but I don't think it would serve any purpose. And we're still groping to come up with something that makes sense there. But we'll have a more concrete, not necessarily better, but a more concrete proposal well before the annual meeting, so that folks can, if they care to, kind of chew on it before the annual meeting. And then we can, I hope, have an intelligent and informed discussion at the meeting.
Thank you.
That's all.
Great. No, thank you, Jeff. And I'll turn it out to the members here. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything that strikes you about the direction or what we're doing, or anything that you'd like to share? We have several minutes, couple of minutes left before we really need to move to any new topics.
Okay.
Just wondering where James is going.
Speaking of on the move,
I see scaffolding.
Home, home. That's the Freedom Tower behind me.
So we know where you are. So, maybe it's a raise of hands of any yes or no, raise a hand. Yes, you like where we're going, the direction where we're going. Right now, if you want to raise your hand. Okay, I see raised hands mostly, right? Okay, so certainly we want to hear whatever feedback in whatever form it is. We want to hear it because all we care about is improving the experience and for all of us. So thank you for that. All right. By the way, a little trivia. What is the most prevalent B40 hull color? Any guesses?
Flag
blue.
blue.
Yeah, that was an easy one.
Yeah.
Warming up.
No points for that, Kristen. Come on.
Okay, so now what is the least popular color?
White.
Yeah, I
Red,
would get white.
Pink,
red.
yellow.
Purple.
Oh, I think we got a winner. It's a tie between yellow, actually teal is the least, and the second least color is yellow. So in terms of number of members only. Now, outside of that, there could be 25 yellow B40s that haven't become members. So anyway, all right. So let me break it up a little bit. All right, so now we're on to on the water topics, and we're going to talk about East Coast sailing and West Coast sailing. So we're going to start with Jeff, and we're hoping Robert Shapiro can chime in here, because there's been a lot of talk about the Annapolis to Nantucket cruise. We understand, you know, it's filled. There's some tangential activities on that cruise, and then also some potential parallel cruises or rendezvous that can happen to overlay, you know, that. So Jeff, yeah, ask you to kind of tell us a little bit something about the Annapolis Yacht Club to Nantucket cruise. And
Sure. Now, first of all, I'm outranked by Brother Shapiro because he's the fleet captain, and I'm only the so-called coordinator, which is kind of like herding cats with sailboats, but I'm supposedly coordinating the sailboats that are participating in the AYC cruise. And so far, I've had minimal interest in doing anything together, which is fine. But the powerboat owners, and there are 3 gentlemen in the club who have really done a fantastic job of setting up the cruise itself, which starts in Newport. We have 2 events in Newport. Then we go to Cuttyhunk, and which is a pretty rural place. I've never been there, and we have some kind of beach party there. Then we go on to Edgartown, and we have some events at the Edgartown Yacht Club, and then from there to Nantucket with events at the Great Ocean Club there, which I gather is quite an exclusive club, and then back to Newport, where we have events at the Ida Lewis and the New York Yacht Club station in Newport. And these 3 gentlemen have just done a fantastic job organizing this and prevailing upon clubs that usually do not open their facilities to other clubs. And somehow we've pried our way in. And most of the events are completely sold out and waitlisted and so on. And I also really appreciate that the pace of the cruise is pretty relaxed. And we'll get some time in each of those places. I have not been to Martha's Vineyard or Cuttyhunk, so for me, that'll be particularly interesting. And I have some family in Nantucket, so it's just a kind of a perfect cruise for me. Now, so far as this group is concerned, if anyone is at all interested, I'll be leaving to go north around the 14th of July, and I'll be departing Newport on the 2nd of August. If anyone is thinking about going north this summer, those are the dates that I'll be doing it, if anyone's interested in some kind of convoy or rendezvousing or whatever. But that's really the story. The actual cruise is completely sold out to members, and there are members on the wait list. So it's not anything that a non-AYC member in this group could participate in. But again, the folks who have organized this have put an extraordinary amount of time into it, and have just done a super job. And I think because last year was such a bust, there's been a real burst of enthusiasm for this cruise. And right now we have 12 sailboats. I'm not sure how many power boats Robert may know, but I have the list, but I haven't counted. Probably twice as many power boats. And it appears that most of the power boats go up the Jersey coast through Hellgate and Long Island Sound. I think most of the sailboats will go directly from Cape May, either to Block Island or to Newport. I plan on going directly to Newport, depending upon the weather and so on. But organizing the crew and figuring out who's going to help me deliver it, who's going to stay on for the whole thing, and that kind of thing has been kind of fun, getting that organized. And the couple that are accompanying me on the cruise itself, who are AYC members, have been kind enough to decide to stay at facilities ashore in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, because as you know, our vessels could be a little cozy with 5 people. So it's only going to be 3 in those places for me, which is good. But that's all I have, just kind of just informational for you all. There will be a AYC cruise to an anchorage in the very beginning of October, and we've been invited to join that. I'm not sure whether it's the weekend of October 2 or October 9, but we all have plenty of time to prepare or think about that, and you'll have plenty of notice. But it will be, the anchor will be someplace on the Chop Tank. I suggested Bobby House Cove. I don't know if that's where it's going to be. It's not going to be Dunn Cove, because that's where we did it 2 years ago. But that's way down the road so far as planning. And then the other cruise really that would be of interest, Mike, is to the Tread Avon Yacht Club, and I think that's also completely sold out. So that's my little bit of news about what we're doing at AYC. Robert probably has more accurate and better information.
Yeah, that's great, Robert. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Jeff summarized it very well. And if anybody needs any sort of assistance finding things, if in fact you can make it, and or we have space, Nantucket, my son is actually going to be a launch tender there for Great Harbor Yacht Club this summer. He's actually negotiating right now about them giving him a slip versus housing, and I'll let him live on the pilot. So we might have that. I mean, I was intending to have that in New England anyway this summer, but it is, again, we have contacts up there. I'm going to actually be stuck with an extra mooring in Mattapoisett because he originally was going to a club closer to there. The key thing, while it doesn't deal with the Nantucket portion, but this Hinckley Regatta coming up, and or the events we do, all of us that have a Pilot 35 or a B40 or even a 38 or a 41, we're all dealing with the same kind of speed. I mean, it's effectively a cruise that happens to have trophies at the end of it. And so I'm really trying to sort of grow that on the bay. So it's laid back. No one's jumping on each other. There's a way to get rated, whether you fly a spinnaker or not fly a spinnaker. There's all these elements to it. And more importantly, with this new sort of caveat to the ORC rule that most clubs are introducing, New York's going to be looking at it as well, a member at New York Yacht Club as well. And so it might be the ability for us to get out there more all over, still be able to race. Getting a club certificate is super easy. There's a bunch of 40s that already have that in place. So it's a matter of just sort of submitting some specs on your sails, and then you can automatically get it. But it's effectively a cruise to a great destination, even though it happens to be a race. So
thank you so much, Robert. I mean, that's very valuable. In fact, we would love to continue this conversation, especially about that. I know Rick and myself are interested in a real PHRF rating for the boat. It seems to be arbitrary, kind of where we are right now. So with that, I'm just going to say a couple things and then hand it to Patrick, who's going to talk about West Coast cruising and Catalina Island and what it's like, and even you know, what the conditions and the water's like. But I'll just throw out there on this photo here, you can see Atlantic Highlands with the moonshot. That's the town. We live in that little town, and it's a great harbor place. If you're on your way cruising northwards to, and you're taking the Jersey route, we do host, you know, a comfortable visit there, a fun visit there on your way. And then New York Harbor, James Bonema, who would have liked to have been on the call here, is gathering more and more information about not only cruising around New York Harbor, but also we have connection with the head of the key yacht club there, who organizes many events around Manhattan, as well as some racing there. We know that James and ourselves are very close to the New York Harbor, and we can even have match races and elevate the you know, the visibility of the B40 in a scenario like that. And it'd be really cool if we had a fleet race on that too. So anyway, just wanted a short, quick note on that, and then I'm gonna, you know, move to Patrick, and we have a number of cool slides, and David, being also on the West Coast, basically chiming in together on this update. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. I would encourage David to add his comments as we walk through this quickly. So if we can move to the first slide. So that's Hypatia, our boat at White's, and this is White's Cove. This is in the winter time, when, as you can see, it's pretty empty and desolate at that time, but it has a great beauty.
Just stunning, really beautiful colors.
Yeah, that was a friend of mine took that as the sun was rising. I think my wife and I were still sleeping in the boat when that picture was taken. Anyhow, we can move to the next slide. So Catalina Island is about 26 miles long. I think it's about 8 miles wide. And it's roughly 30 miles off the Southern California coast. It's the easiest shot is from Long Beach. And with the prevailing southwesterlies, it's just a great reach over there from that location in the afternoons. Unfortunately, I am down in Dana Point at the lower right-hand part of the page. And even further down, that's Newport, down where those two red marks are. And it's an upwind slog pretty much, unless you have some unusual wind. So I usually leave early in the morning and motor up, and then hope for a nice downwind sail on the return. You can see that there is a shipping channel there. It's about 2 miles wide. And we need to be very aware of the international freight that is coming and going. It's usually not an issue at all, except when it gets foggy. And that's when you're very happy to have a good radar. And I often use the app that allows you to trap ships to, you know, kind of support that, so you can tell what's out there, even though you see a blip on the radar. And we have had some situations where, you know, it's been a little daunting when it gets thick out there. So that's something that can happen in the winter time and in the spring. Summer, it doesn't seem to be as much of a problem. Anything to add to that, David?
No, I haven't, believe it or not, I haven't sailed to Catalina. I've been there on the ferry and, you know, whatnot, science camp. But I got in the boat. But I can get around to it.
Well, it's interesting. People of all sorts cross the channel. They swim, they take jet skis, they sail tiny boats sometimes. There's a water ski race to Avalon and back, 62 miles. The record is under 50. So there's a lot of people that come and go to the island, and it has a lot of history that we really won't go into today. But it's really an interesting place to visit. Typically, as I said, the wind is southwesterly, 10 to 25 knots on any given day in the spring and summer. During the winter, we really have to keep our eye on the weather when we're crossing, mostly to watch out for what we call, Santa Ana winds, which are offshore winds, and, create a lee shore on the east side there, where most people visit. The west side of the island is much more wild, less protected to the open ocean. And so, most of the activities occur on that easterly facing side of the island. We can move to the next slide. So here's a shot of my son and a friend on the way over. And we can move to the next one. This just kind of gives you a rough idea of the two primary locations that people visit when they come to the island. Avalon is by far the most popular, and I was surprised when I was reading up on it a little bit that 1 million people visit the island every year. I found that to be shocking, but I did have to remind myself that the cruise ships like to come in there on occasion. And Avalon gets a lot of traffic in the summer. There's boats that come from a lot of different directions that have day trippers, so it can get very crowded, but it's a really interesting place to visit. They have an old historic casino there, and very picturesque, the old green pier. There's a lot of outings, activities, scuba diving. You can rent kayaks, you can rent golf carts, there's zip line. Around the corner from the casino, there's Descanso Beach, and there's more moorings out there. And they have concerts there and a really great outdoor bar there. So Avalon's worth a visit. It's just that, it's in the middle of summer, you want to go midweek, and then come the weekend, maybe move to Two Harbors. The Two Harbors and Avalon are really the two primary places people visit. And there's a lot of really nice anchorages on the way between. They're about 10 miles apart. And those little green dots you see there are places where there are also some moorings in those locations, and you can dinghy to these pristine old beaches and go on some great hikes with spectacular views on the island. So we typically like to spend most of our time in the Two Harbors area. And then on the other side, you have Catalina Harbor and Little Harbor, which are less frequented, but also very beautiful spots. You also note that red line is on Trans-Catalina Trail, which is about 38 miles, and it's become very popular to backpack for 4 days on that trail and sleep on some of these pristine beaches, and primitive campsites have been set up. Next slide, please.
Patrick, with Santa Ana winds, which side is the lee shore?
So the Santa Ana winds come off the land, and at that point, Two Harbors and a lot of these other, where you see the green dots, become exposed. As a matter of fact, on Memorial Day weekend, about 25 years ago, my mother-in-law and her boyfriend lost their boat on one of those situations in Goat Harbor, which is near Long Point. That's another story, but yeah, you have to be very conscious of that and really watch the weather, especially certain times of the year. Summertime is pretty stable out here, so it's more of a fall and winter condition when we see those strong winds.
Okay, so we have some beautiful pictures here. Photographs.
Yeah, these are still photographs of Avalon, and as you can see, you have a lot of restaurants and places for people to stay. So this is, I believe this is Shark Harbor, and that is one of the places you can camp if you're inclined to do the backpacking trip. Now this slide here is Two Harbors, and this is the Isthmus Cove, which faces east. And again, the primary location where most boaters go. There's a huge amount of mooring balls out here that go into other coves to the west, and it's just an absolutely gorgeous place.
Patrick, we've been getting some chats in here. Some folks might be interested in traveling out and crewing on some of these. So anyway, just FYI. So I know we have a couple more great photos. We're going to send the PowerPoint out to everyone too. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. And I wanted to make sure I got to this picture because it's just great.
Yeah, that was heading home and in the morning and hoping for some good wind in the afternoon to continue a nice downwind run. That's my wife at the helm there.
Ah, well, maybe we'll have her on our next month's session. Say hello.
Hope so.
Great. Well, thank you so very much. Any ads from anyone? Any questions other than what's in the chat? Great. Well, thank you. I want to fly out there now and take the trip. So, so this is a perfect segue into actual sailing performance, and we're going to say sailing the B40, performance sailing part 2, since we started last month on talking very about upwind, downwind, reaching centerboards. So this part is just really kind of a continuation of the discussion. We have obviously a number of different setups. We have the sloop and the yawl setup, and in particular, we had a presentation last month. John from Black Irish presented how he does his ASIM and ASIM setup and rigging. But this time, David was from Glory B is going to talk through. We've presented this picture of the beautiful Glory B so many times since the very beginning, and many times we've started talking about this tri-radial setup with which looks like the tack is attached to the bow, but I think, David, you're going to walk through what actually is happening with this setup with the tri-radial, right?
Right. And I had just a briefing. I'd sailed in my teens and 20s, not a lot of cruising, and only knew a symmetrical. And then I took 20 or 30 years off between family and work, and I got back into sailing in my 50s and Glory be. And so I'd never sailed an asymmetrical before. So I had to learn all this stuff, and it was very interesting. And of course, there's no asymmetrical on a B40 is a new thing. The boat manager is named Charlie Salin, and he used to be a star, race stars internationally for many years. And he had a mountain climbing gear business, so he knows his blocks and his lines. And incredible. So he came up with this, and extra that goes around the forestay toggle there at the bow, and then he created this. The rest of the line with the blocks and so forth that attach to the tack on the asymmetrical, and it works great. Jibing is easy. It's a real quick setup, takedown, and that Spectra since 2000. Well, we take it off between sails, and we've used it dozens of times, and it's just not showing anywhere at all. And the first spinnaker, and the ones you see in the photo I have, was an A2. It was about 1,000 square feet. And since, as I mentioned, the wind comes out of the southwest in Santa Monica Bay, we just go up the coast towards Malibu and then back down, and that's our 4 hours in the afternoon. And so we're, upwind going to Malibu and then back down to reach Broad Reach. And the A2 was a little big. After 10 knots, it would overwhelm the rudder a bit. So we got then a smaller, now an A3, 800 feet. And it's just that'll reach at 50 knots, and that's about the time the guys on the foredeck start giving me dirty looks. So we bring it in, but Like I say, I just wanted to clarify. I know it looks tack to the bowsprit, but it's not. It's a very solid, reliable set.
That's great. No, thanks for walking through it. I meant to say ASIM, and I think I might have said tri-radial, but this, of course, is a slightly different setup as John's, who has a bit different, you know, with the not articulating, but the pole. So within this setup, would you, just out of curiosity, do you see any benefits or detractions from having this kind of setup versus what you have on your own for performance?
Are you talking to me? I have gone awry. I can see a little window. Oh wait, let me try this. I've lost the main screen.
Oh, no. Okay. Can you see, okay, so we had a bowsprit, a Seldman Brown bowsprit for John Sovereign's ASIM.
Right, I remember.
And yeah, so we were just curious, you know, pros and cons from having a bowsprit set up versus the way you have it set up.
Well, if you get that extra, you know, length of your, to get that tack out further a couple of feet, it really does make a difference. And there are times I've longed for that, but this, yeah, it'll go in the reach. I mean, it really does, dandy, and it works just fine, broad reach. It's really kind of an easy up and down, and not much extra, you know, fittings on it. Well, there are no other extra fittings on the boat. I mean,
Simple.
yeah.
By the way, I was jealous with this beautiful setup you have in stowing your spin sheets. So thank you for sharing that photo.
Yes, I'm glad for that.
Yeah, Commodore Zahn has put in her order. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
When you,
So I think we have Hunter on. Hunter's been a lifelong sailor here before his B40 that he purchased last year, which we learned from Mariana tonight was part of the family, you know, before Hunter's in Chicago and sails the, in fact, Hunter's Condecoro is here off to the right. And we have Wayne Lee's Glory Days here off to the left. But we're going to ask Hunter, you know, maybe start with downwind since we're chatting about downwind, but you know, switch to reaches and then upwind. Tips and tricks, and you know, how do we get the most speed? You have a good comparison between some of the sailing racing boats versus, you know, the B40, but talk to us about what the differences have been for you and how you're working to get the most speed out of your Condecoro.
Sure. Thanks so much. I'm super excited to have be a part of the fleet. I come from a lot of different boats in the past. I have a Melgus 24, so I've been doing a lot of asymmetrical sailing over the last 5-6 years. Do a lot of symmetrical big boat sailing in Chicago and kind of all around. So been doing both, kind of back to the symmetrical game, as I do not have any sort of asymmetrical setup on Condecoro right now. But after looking at all the photos and the different setups, it's probably going to be in the sail inventory pretty soon. But this past summer, I was really experimenting with getting back to the roots of classic symmetrical sailing. So squaring back, sailing very deep, you know, 15 degrees downwind, you know, driving through 30 degrees total, and then also trying to play with the staysail setup off of the mizzen as well, and trying to figure out what the best true wind angle is for that, and also the apparent wind angle that most people are sailing with that setup. But I think downwind is something that I haven't really, I mean, it's nothing really different in so much as the setup with the mizzen setup, which I'm not too familiar with. So it's been just a lot of experimenting, and I don't really have, you know, the answers, and that's part of the reason why I'm here for the downwind setup. In terms of, you know, more reaching, you know, I did some passages this past summer, sailing across the lake a couple times, and, you know, got so far forward as, you know, putting the pole, you know, almost on the head stay, just to try to carry the kite a little bit longer, and just seeing how the boat, you know, responds with that. The boat just loves, you know, being heeled over with the more water line. So it felt, you know, super balanced downwind. I was actually shocked by that, and the loads weren't so much that that it felt, you know, dangerous in that regard. But you know, I can certainly speak, you know, upwind a lot more than I can about the downwind, because I've just been sailing it classically downwind, symmetrical, squared back as much as possible, and sailing deep. But I'm sure that there are much more experts on the call with the staysail setup. I have two different staysails on the boat right now in the inventory, and it seems like one is a much flatter setup and one is a lot deeper setup. And I'm having some issues with luff tension on that staysail, where it's tacking down to the deck, and I'm having some interference with the backstay coming into play. So I don't know if I'm just trying to use that sail a little bit too high of an angle, and it should be a little bit more of a reach or a run on that. So I don't know if somebody can speak to that, or if it's just the wrong sail on that point of sail. But I'm looking at that photo to the left there, and it, you know, it looks like they're almost on like a beam reach, which is what I was doing, but I was just getting a lot of interference with the backstay, with the luff kind of folding around that backstay.
Any thoughts from those on the line? I know we had Ed on, you know, several racer sailors on B40. Any contribution to downwind from your perspective?
David Dale here.
Hey, David.
Hi.
By the way, I'm sorry. Before you chime in, David is the son of the original first B40 owner. His father had Huntress, the first one off the production. Sorry to do that and embarrass you, David, but we're really happy to have you on. And what color is your boat hull?
Yellow. Well,
yellow.
Originally it was Fighting Lady Yellow, but it's sort of faded at this point. But whenever we would sail any sort of downwind run, we would set up the mizzen staysail any way that we could get to work. So sometimes it's attached to the base of the base of the mast. It can be on the upside, the upwind deck. It can be downwind deck, whatever made it happy. And I agree. Sometimes the aft stay had to work around that. But it had so much variability as to how you set it that it was a lot of fun. So we were never racing.
Yeah, I'm actually looking to do more cruising and kind of get out of the racing, but I like to get from point A to point B fast. So I'm definitely interested. I've been playing around with the tack position and kind of floating it up, kind of tacking it, pinning it down. But visibility is definitely an issue.
Yeah, so this is Peter. One of the comments I have is it looks pretty much like Condacora / Pagan does not have the original mizzen.
On that photo to the right?
Looks a little tall. Not as tall as Firefly, mind you, which really doesn't have the original. But part of that gets to, if you look at the low aspect ratio on glory days, that slack luff gives you an indication that it's pretty easy to clear the backstay. The taller taller the mizzen gets, the tighter you're trying to carry the sail, and the more you're going to get interference if you're tacking to the windward deck.
Copy that. And then, so if you're tacking it to the leeward deck, do you just, like, obviously there's no slot between the main and the steel, so would you ever strike the main?
No, no, I wouldn't do that. I would, if you think you need to tack it to the leeward deck, you shouldn't be carrying the mizzen steel.
Copy that. Okay, perfect. I haven't tried that. So.
Well, David again here. At least on Huntress, there is a deck plate to screw the tack into that's not very far outside of the cockpit. And so whenever we were on a pretty close to full down run, you tack it there and it almost becomes like a spinnaker off of the mizzen mast, and it did not backwind the main at all.
Nice.
I see we have Richard Rosenthal, the winner of the ELF race, on from a few years ago, before COVID era. Hi, Richard. Any thoughts on downwind or upwind sailing trips and tips?
Well, thanks. No, not at all. I'm just trying to learn as much as I possibly can. We've been on the hardwall last year, so I'm kind of getting back into it. So my sailing, my most valuable sailing tip is have a great crew. That's all I can offer right now. Nice to see you all.
Great to see you, Richard. Terry, anybody else want to any upwind perspectives? I got a question that came in about we talk a lot about the centerboard, especially on the angle and how many cranks down, up, etc. on different points. But got a question in about side-by-side play in the centerboard, and something that needed to be fixed, actually. And I forgive me for not knowing exactly who asked that question, but anyone have side-by-side play that is not a good thing for your upwind performance? Or is that a unique problem?
Kristen, I asked that question.
Oh, David, okay, thank you.
Because when I first bought the boat and it was in the slings, and the boat, yacht surveyor was looking through things, he wiggled this thing and he became very alarmed. Went side to side so much. And so I think you all mentioned last week, some folks had the same issue. He's been able to figure out a solution, or if there should be one, better maybe leave it alone. But I was curious if anyone had any thoughts on
that. So this is Peter. There's a lot of clearance in the centerboard trunk on certainly the older boats. And so the side-to-side play happens when either the journal in the centerboard wears a little bit, while the Monel pin doesn't, and so you get wobble. The hole's bigger than it used to be, and or the other problem could be that the pin is wearing. That is much more troublesome than a widening hole in a 900-pound bronze casting, which isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so, he's worried about it for performance reasons. Unless you're Actea, you're not worried about it for performance reasons. The pin is captive. There's a plate on each side of the keel for each of the two pins. There's a pivot pin that carries the load. These are up forward in the lead castings. There's a pivot pin that carries the load, and there's a keeper pin that keeps the centerboard from dropping out of the boat if the pivot pin fails. The one on Firefly, after we'll go 60 years just because it's a round number, has never been out of the boat.
I don't think mine has been addressed either ever, and
It's never been out of the boat.
probably
I
also-
haven't seen it. I didn't take it out of the boat.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, David, I'm glad you asked the question, and any other questions like that, please feel free to send ahead of our next month's session as well. By the way, I just wanted to welcome Carlo. I didn't notice your face down here, and thank you for sharing a photo as your background of your beautiful boat. So, and I see Bill Morgan here. Hello, you look very comfortable. So, great. So we're going to move to the next topic, which is electronics. And in particular, Peter's going to continue to help kind of inform us on, in particular, AIS systems, which, by the way, Rick and myself just purchased within this month, and heading sensors, and even if we have some time to talk about offshore Wi-Fi options. I got this picture of a nav station with wires hanging out all over the place. It's stock photo, but I thought it was kind of gives you the feeling of when you think of your electronics setup, at least for me. So I'm going to hand it off to Peter to talk us through. We have a number of different informational slides to go through too. So Peter, just let me know to change the slide when you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Kristen. So yeah, that's actually a fairly modern B40 over there on the left. Most of us have to lay on top of the cooler to get to the power panel and bus bars. And
I have to be honest, Peter, that's a stock photo from from the internet. It's not a B40. So I have to
Okay.
admit.
All right, fair enough. All right, so honestly, folks, I'm much more comfortable talking about hydrodynamics and painting your bottom and burying your keel and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm fascinated by the modern electronics, especially with the advent of the NEMA 2000 standard. I spent years doing instrumentation on tests and trials of ships and boats. And I can buy you the most expensive stuff and the most, expensive interface equipment, but being able to just plug things together has been an absolute godsend. So do not be afraid to tear every wire out of your boat and replace them. It's just
Did that last winter.
yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah, we've done it. I'm about to do it again. Not about to do it again, but so the two topics I had teed up were heading sensors and AIS. The Wi-Fi extension I'm going to cut that to a little shorter and say, you guys need to tell me what kind of information you want, and I'll help you. I will say up front that most of what I learned on the internet. I'm an engineer, so I think I can get most of it right. But there's a blog, website, a guy who does most of the electronics reviews for most of the major magazines, and he has a blog called Panbo. So if you got electronic questions, look up PANBO, and they're very good about new stuff. They don't provide updates very often. So if you're looking for how your Simrad Wi-Fi 1 works, it's not going to be much help because they covered it when it was released and they haven't done anything since. All right, Kristen, let's go to the next one. So heading sensors. Somebody asked, why do I care about a heading sensor if I've got one for my autopilot, right? And so the fact is that if you have an older system, the only thing the heading sensor does is feed information to the autopilot. There are other things you'd like it to do. like give you the ability to have a compass alternative. If something happens to your compass, they're pretty damn reliable. But if you need an alternative, having some readout from that electronic sensor is good. If you want to know wind angle for your polars or any other reason, you need your heading sensor to be integrated to your wind instrument and be able to do that math. We all know the math, but most of us can't do it in our head. And then the last part, of course, is the autopilot control, which is what the typical FluxGate compass sensor that, you know, the one I took out of Firefly weighed 23 pounds. It was gimbaled, it was damped, it was a very nice system in 1982. The current version of that costs about 150 bucks. And you can get it with either, you know, the old NEMA standard or the analog NEMA standard, which is suitable for autopilot because it's a continuous it's a continuous analog signal, which means that you don't have the problem with update rates. The technology's gotten better. You've got solid state FluxGate sensors. Most of you have phones that serve as compasses. You've got some inertial, you know, what do we call them? Accelerometers. Some of you have them in your phones. If you look in the range where they're telling you you need a 0.9 RC42 or a 0.9 sensor for your system, that includes all of those things. It includes rate information as well as attitude information, and most of them are now NEMA 2000, so they plug right in. Some of you have seen the satellite heading sensors. Basically, that's two GPS receivers separated by about 2 feet, and they actually calculate the heading between the two sensors. This overcomes the GPS problem, which is you can get heading out of GPS, but only if you're moving. This one gives you alignment between the two receivers, the array. Minimum 700 bucks, up to 5,000 bucks. Personally, I'm not sure why it's worth it. And of course, if you're a professional, you want a gyro compass, it costs about 10,000 bucks and it's the size of a small refrigerator. So, you know, these heading sensors give you the ability to have a heading independent from GPS. If you're worried about GPS failing, if you're a prepper and you're worried about spoofing, those are the kinds of things you want. You want something different. The NEMA 2000 and the 0183 system interfaces are a generation apart. I have a whole panel for the 0183 system interface. I just have a plug for the NEMA 2000. And so the only thing you really need to worry about in terms of whether it's going to support your required needs is how fast it updates and how accurate it is. Most of them are accurate enough to meet all the requirements, but the update rate is the thing that makes it suitable or unsuitable for autopilot use or the automatic radar plotting aid use. And so those are the things to look for. I currently have a heading sensor in a box that I'm not going to install because I'm about to get a different one for my autopilot. The one I have is the same one I have on my powerboat, which is one of those $250 Navico units. It has the advantage of having a separate GPS, so it's a GPS backup as well as the heading sensor. So if you're already got an autopilot system and it's got a dedicated heading sensor and it's not NEMA 2000, consider getting one of those kinds of things so that you have input into your sailing instruments and a backup for heading without GPS. That's how that one works. Next one, Kristen. And I'm probably running time fast, so the next one is the AIS.
Getting a little close on time. Maybe I can ask, we have those for options. Do we want to, there's a lot of great information to cover on electronics. There's also this kind of lightning round next on dinghies, about best outboards and best dinghies, and just show of hands, if you will. I'm going to expand my screen out. Would you like to kind of, we can have a part 2 electronics for next month also.
Sure.
Or we can continue on with electronics now and skip over dinghy and have dinghy next month. So who's for, let's keep on going with electronics and dinghy next month? Show of hands. Electronics. Okay, who wants to go to like dinghies right now in part 2 electronics? Okay, I mean, yeah, everybody's very, very nice. I could see.
We'll send the slides out. We'll pull this next month and answer the questions.
Yeah, but we will get your commitment, Peter. You're going to be back on next month to go over the rest of these, right?
Yeah, unless she does something to me.
Can you go through your slides? Can you go through your slides real quick to give us a preview?
Sure. The AIS stuff is the same thing. I will tell you that the AIS stuff is, we already heard about using your cell phone to keep track of where things are. In Southern California, that works great. I will tell you the only AIS I currently have on the boat is one of these radios that allows me to call somebody who's bearing down on me and telling him I'm going to get out of the way. I would not go off the east coast of the U.S. without an AIS transponder. I would prefer it over a radar. Next one. This is the Coast Guard, description of the different AIS stuff. It's gobbledygook. The next one, the bottom line here is that if you only update every 30 seconds, you have a problem because a ship moving at 20 knots moves 300 yards. And so if you're trying to use this for close-in stuff, you want to make sure you have the fastest update rate you can get. And, I can talk to you about which update rates those are. Part of the problem isn't how fast the transmission is updated, it's which protocol is used to capture the data. You're much more likely to drop data with some protocols as opposed to others.
I'm going to pipe in for 2 seconds. I own a NMEA certified for 17 years, own a company, all the manufacturers. AIS, SO will save your life. BSO in New England, if you shouldn't be looking at anything below that protocol, in my opinion. So,
Robert, thank you for chiming in that. Peter, we might be going offline and talking about what we just purchased, but
the odds are you got what you need.
Yeah,
most of them is
and
true.
Especially with Robert's input there. So thank you so much. Okay, cool. So we're going to do our normal lightning round, and basically it's 1 minute to each of the panelists, of which there are several. Can pick one of the 2 questions. What type of dinghy has been the best for you and why? Or what type of outboard is best for you and why? Or you can pass the question to either another panelist or the audience member. I wanted to point out that I was able to find Penny's a photograph. I think, Peter, this might be your dinghy. Is that correct?
No, that one's not mine. That's actually a Chesapeake Lightcraft, nice boat.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, the point there is you can get an inflatable, this, that, the other, or these beautiful vintage, dinghies, that's all part of the thing. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start with Peter, and I'm actually going to use the bell. And when the time is up, and you have literally 60 seconds, and I'm gonna set my timer right now. And so here we go.
Okay, so we
Ready, go.
We have an 8-foot hard shell dinghy that's been on deck twice, mostly because we don't go very far. We have towed it around a lot. It's very stable. Of course, if it sank behind the boat, it would be a problem. I have no engine for it because as a nice hard shell dinghy, it rows beautifully, and you can go all over, and we can send my son and grandson out to go around the marshes in the South River or the Wye River, and it works great. So that's our dinghy right now. I am looking at an inflatable soft bottom as a long range option, and I would have to have a motor for that.
Wow, you have 8 seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Patrick.
Okay, so I had very good luck with the West Marine rib, which I think was a 10-foot 2 rib. And for a long time, I had a 10-horse old Mercury 2-stroke on it, and that thing really flew. It was like being on a little jet ski. But I've since gone to a Yamaha 4-stroke 6-horse just for reliability. And I'm about the end of the life for that rib because it was PVC, and the Hypalon is much more durable.
You have 25 seconds more. Or do you want to hand it to somebody of your choice?
Oh, whoever would like to speak.
I'm gonna. Okay, Carlo, 10 seconds.
Oh, well, nice to see everybody. And
Okay.
I just want to point out, I have an H38, not a B40. But I'm very interested and I'm learning a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Carlo. Yeah, I think whether you have a 38, a 40, or whatever, the dinghy decisions tend to be, kind of similar, is depending on how we actually use our boats and how far we go with them, etc. So with that, I'm going to go to, do we have David Bell still on?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, David, your choice of question and answer.
No, I'll just pass it on.
Oh, you pass it on? Who? Okay, you have to name somebody to pass it to.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Who hasn't spoken yet? Oh, you know what?
You can.
I don't know the rules on this exactly. But I have a question.
You can.
I have a quick
Yeah.
question. Dale.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
Hello, David. Dale. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Beautiful photo I found of a yellow B40 in a cove, looks like in New England with pine trees all around. Is that Huntress? With the mizzen up?
It quite possibly, depending on the age of the photo. When we purchased Huntress, it was up in Maine as part of Hinckley's charter fleet. And after a number of years, we then brought her south to the Chesapeake Bay area.
Just curious. All right, I'm done. Thank you. Go ahead.
Kristen,
Thank you.
Kristen, I'll toss out something about dinghies.
Okay.
For all the years that my father was particularly active on board, we had inflatable Zodiac because he was a little unstable getting from the height of the deck down to the boat. And with the Zodiac being very, very stable, and he could stand on the pontoon to allow him to get into the dinghy. So that was just for people, not that anybody in this group is getting a little older and frailer. Inflatable Zodiac was very stable and really good.
Lots of benefits there. No, that's great. And do we have Hunter on?
Yeah,
I think not.
I'm a big fan of the Suzuki 2.5 outboard. That's what I'm going to say about it. Super reliable, no issues. So I would take that over a Torqeedo any day. That's what I have to say about it.
Why is that?
Super reliable, and if you run out of fuel, everyone has fuel. No one has a spare battery.
Very, very good. You have 35 seconds. Do you want to hand it to somebody on the line here?
Yeah, sure. All right, Jeff.
Okay, I have had a Mercury 3 or 4 horsepower, and I was ready to put it in the dumpster. It was very hard to keep going, very finicky. The carburetor on these tiny 4-stroke engines is with tiny jets in it. And I've gone with the Torqeedo, however you pronounce it, and I love it. And the information that you have in the handle tells you how fast you're going, how far you can go, where you are. Well, not exactly where you are, but how far you can go and how far you've been and how much charge is left. And also what I like now that I'm getting older is it comes apart. It comes in 3 pieces. So it's much more comfortable lowering it onto the dinghy because you don't want to tow the dinghy with the motor on it. And it's much better that way. I had put a little crane on my boat, and that really didn't work very well with the outboard. But I'm sold on the electric thing.
Okay. Wow, that was pretty impressive. Okay. Okay. I'm having to shut off all my electronic timers and everything. So no, that was great. That was fun. And thank you all for participating in that. We do have 10 minutes left, and what we normally try to do is squeeze in as many questions on topics. And basically this is where the panelists hand it out to everybody who's joined here with any questions at all. These topics, we typically say, if you want navigation lighting for 300, I'll take, and then ask your question, and then the panelists will have to answer to that. So we're handing it out, and as many questions as we can fit in. I keep score by just putting the dollar amount down and tallying it up at the end. But who would like to start with the first question? All right.
Okay, Kristen, I'll go with the wild card under exterior deck.
Okay.
And my question is this. For wash downs, has anybody, or for those that have a wash down, where is yours located? Number one. And number two, are there individuals, if they do not have it, considering putting wash down on their deck?
Well, I can answer that. We have a wash down and we love it. It's basically way forward, just after the bow on the port side, and we have it hooked up so that you can wash down either with fresh water or seawater. We use it to take showers. I use it to hose down the anchor, when I'm putting the anchor back up on the boat, and it's just fantastic, and we love it. It's just a hose bib. It's a hose bib sticking up above the deck on port side, maybe a foot, maybe 2 feet after the bow.
Thank you, Richard. You're nearby, and I think we did. I did ask you the question before. Is there anybody else by chance that has had any other installations?
Icefire has 2. I have a saltwater wash down up by the anchor, and then on the port side by the cockpit, I have a freshwater wash down, which I don't use much at all because I took out the forward water tank and don't carry a whole lot of water, so I don't use the freshwater wash down. Well, I have 2 separate ones, one salt and one fresh.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, I have the same setup on my boat. Freshwater washdown is just aft of the gate on the port side, and the saltwater washdown is up forward. I use the saltwater washdown to rinse off the anchor. The freshwater washdown I use to take showers. And when I bought the boat, it had those spigot type valves that would hook up that you hook a hose to, and I figure, you know, I'm going to stub my toes on those. So I replaced them with the type that are completely recessed. And it has a little, you know, hinged flap that, you know, slides all over the opening.
Great, thanks, I
All right.
appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for the question. Next up, anyone want to pick another topic?
Can I ask a question?
Yep. You can
So
call out the
holding tanks, water tanks on Aquila 1963. I've got the original Monell tanks. There's one under the forward berth and then under the cabin sole. And recently I've found it looks like algae in the tanks, and they're the original Monell tanks. And I was wondering if anyone's had any buildup of any kind of algae or particulate in the tanks, and how they went about treating it or flushing it out without, you know, cutting the tanks open to physically inspect them and get in there.
So, Kristen, this Peter, one of the things that is possible is that most of these water tanks, I'm not sure who is not on mute here.
Most of the water tanks are, you know, as he says, Monell, and standard treatments for biohazards and biologics. The bottom line is, if the boat's still out of the water, you're in good shape. Take the plug out of the keel, put a whole bunch of bleach in it, and flush the heck out of it. Start with the forward tank, let it flow back into the main tanks, and flow lots of water through it. If you're in the water, this of course becomes a bilge pump issue. How much water can your bilge pump take out? But again, it's pretty much the same thing. If you're in the water, the advantage is that you can take it out and swing the boat around and flop it around and take it out in waves and, you know, do that. The water tanks are very much able to be treated that way, as opposed to a 50-year-old fuel tank that needs to be opened up and sucked out.
We have our Monell tanks flushed.
Yeah, we flush our tank every year.
No, but you had the yard clean them and inspect them.
So I'm on the hard, so I have that luxury to rinse it out. How much bleach do you use?
Basically, you're looking at a cup of bleach and about 10 gallons of water. Okay. And I would go ahead and close the valve on the head tank, put the bleach and water mixture in there, flow it back to the tanks, and do that a couple times, and then do whatever you can for high volume flow through the system while it's on the hard.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw out some wild card for 400 questions. There was a question for Peter, you know, what is the brand in the $600 thing on the slide that was in the back in the electronics? I can flip back if you want.
Or are we talking the AIS or the heading sensors?
Heading sensor, $600.
Okay, so the one that's pictured is the RC42, which is the old Navico Simrad B&G sensor. The current sensor in that range is the 0.9 sensor. If you're doing a autopilot for Ray Marine, I can't remember what they call it, but it looks like a flying saucer nowadays. And what those sensors have is they have a solid state heading sensor. They have 3-axis rate sensors, and they have 3-axis roll, pitch, and yaw sensors, all of which have math in them to make things more stable and less jerky, and they do much better with the electronics for the pilots and the MARPA stuff. So all the major manufacturers have one of those, and it's anywhere from 600 to 750.
Cool. All right, next one up, and we are going over, but since we started a little bit late, if folks have 10 more minutes, we can keep on going with questions.
I have a wild card question.
Okay.
Has anybody converted to dripless propeller shaft seal, or is that uncommon on these boats, or what are people's thoughts on that?
Would you repeat the question? Repeat the question, okay?
Okay, I'm talking about the propeller shaft seal. And is there a dripless type of shaft seal you can get? Because my boat, has a slow drip.
Then you are in perfect shape.
Yeah, I tend to, so I have a couple boats, and one of my boats has a set of high horsepower Cummins. On those, the dripless is invaluable. You have to have it. On my boat, I just expect a tiny bit of drip in the beginning of the season, right after it goes in, and it seems to settle in and the drip disappears. And I just have standard, flax packing, and it works beautifully. And I wouldn't even contemplate changing it because it only drips for a few days before everything settles to the right space. So I don't know. I've only owned my boat for 4 years, so I'm sure others have longer period of time of experience with that.
If I can jump in, I don't know if you can hear me now. I want to second Peter's thought, because I had the boatyard. Somebody didn't tighten the set screws down, and so I had the reverse problem. My seal was becoming loose. And my wife and I were out off the coast of Maine, and I didn't even notice it until the water was close to the floorboards, and I thought I was sinking. I didn't know where it was coming from, and it took me a long time to figure that out. I spent a fortune rebedding the rudder post because they thought it was that, and eventually we figured out it was just the screw hadn't been tightened. But a few drips, that's a great thing.
Yeah, the bottom line is on these vessels with the low power density, a standard a historically appropriate standard packing seal, and maybe you can use Gore-Tex packing, is what you want, because there will be no catastrophic failure as long as you keep track of the hose that puts the packing onto the tube. The problem with the dripless seals is they do have the ability to catastrophically fail. And that trade-off for a dry bilge on a 50 or 60-year-old boat just doesn't seem to be a good plan.
Okay, so it looks like we're even with the first at 1800, and we have 5 more minutes left, so we can beat the first month's tally. with 2 more questions. So
I'd like to
anyone
ask a
else like to
question,
add?
Kristen.
Yep.
How about $200 optimal stowage configuration? Thinking of that
Okay.
lovely photo of the lines hanging in the locker, where are your sales?
That would be, to me, that is in the, we keep up in the V-berth. We have 2 spinnakers, 2 mizzen staysails, and so that's where they live. And we try to keep the lazarettes as open as we can. I have a lot of like a cockpit cover and so forth, shade covers, and they stow in the lazarette.
I have a sort of plumbing head, but it's not really plumbing head, but it's plumbing. And this weekend, I've got a diesel heater installed, but not the fuel side of it. I have the exhaust side of it done. I need to pass the exhaust vent hoses forward through about 4 bulkheads. I was planning on using an exhaust hose that is wider diameter than the 60 millimeter diameter I have, and then just using hose clamps on each end so that it safely passes through, but not passes heat through the actual bulkhead. Is there any other great way to pass a vent hose forward in a diesel heater? Did I ask your
Robert,
point? Did I stump people? Go ahead.
Robert, is this for an Espar heater?
It's a Webesto, but same exact things.
Okay, because I have an Espar, and you know, all of the vent hoses are this kind of paper material.
Right. I have insulation for it, for the record.
Okay. Well, the Espar heater is in the port cockpit locker. I've got one heat vent right underneath the stove in the galley. Got another vent in the head, and I've got a 3rd vent up in the forward cabin.
That's my plan.
So it was already installed when I bought the boat, so I'm not really sure what they did to punch through, you know, bulkheads. The outlet in the head is one of those round kind of vent things that you spin it like a quarter turn and it opens it.
Right.
And then the vents under the stove in the galley and up in the forward cabin, it's, you know, right at the cabin sole level.
Right. I have that. I've got the louvered vents. The question is passing through the bulk to protect the bulk. Peter, you're the engineer.
So frankly, I would see if I could find a flanged pass-through vent on our friends at McMaster-Carr.
Okay.
But what essentially you're looking for is a tube of the appropriate size. You're going to drill a hole through the bulkhead, right?
Right.
God bless you. And then you're going to, but rather than trying to pass the hose through, I think you should have a cylindrical metal.
I have that. I'm already game on that. I'm going to use an exhaust hose, slice it, put 2 hose clamps on each side so it can't wiggle. And then I'll pass my vent through hose through it.
Right. And so I would find a what we call a sheet metal duct round tube.
Okay.
And put that through the bulkhead and then clamp your hose on both sides. Because because the biggest thing you're worried about is vibration induced
chafing. Right.
Okay.
Again, I'm already ahead of you because
rubbing and that kind of
right.
stuff.
I'm using the exhaust hose. The inner diameter of the exhaust hose handles the actual vent hose.
Right.
So I'm achieving that pass-through. I just wonder if there was another prefab, like, female, male that I could put through if anyone's seen that.
I don't know. I think there probably is.
Okay.
I would check McMaster car.
Okay.
Or
all right, I'll give that a shot.
Well, I just wanted to say that we just beat our first one by about $300. So we have 2,100 and many questions. And I think this was great, this Q&A, and this worked out great. So thank you, everybody. We have about 6 seconds, before we end. I just wanted to, first of all, thank everybody. I mean, this was really fun. I knew it was going to be fun when I was planning this. I wanted to, again, thank you, Ed Stroh, for sending in so many pictures and descriptions. We are actually keeping a log of work done so that we can have a central place if you have a question between these monthly sessions, keeping a tally of what's going on and what type of work everybody's doing on the boat. If you opt to contribute, it's not something that, obviously is required, but it's helpful, to share. And then I think what we're going to try to do, given that, Fridays are going to be fun, let's get ready for the weekend kind of days, kind of moving to Thursday night. If this is comfortable with everyone, keeping with Thursday and aiming for the last Thursday in May for our next session, which we'll be announcing. We're certainly very interested in bringing on new panelists. We have this kind of, protocol that the panelists come on twice and then they tap somebody else on the shoulder and say, okay, now you gotta, come in and be the panelist, but everybody gets like 2 terms, and then you can, then elect your successor. And obviously we're always looking for topics. I think, we're pretty responsive when you email us at the B40 email. And lastly, and this is my huge apology, we were on target to finish the website this month. I might have taken on a little bit too much. I did take on a brand new job at Citibank, and it's a very heavy lift. And I put everything on hold with regards to the website, but things are leveling out, and I think I'm back on. So we have, we're going to be able to get this website hopefully launched by the end of May instead of now, just a month to go. So that's it for the program. Any final thoughts or anything you want to share before we close out the session?
I just have one thing, on both every one of these meetings, there's always been something that we didn't get a chance to cover, like a follow-up for any questions of prior topics. Just a suggestion, and maybe, and then we start the meetings of anything to clean up, but just a thought.
No, James, that's a good idea.
Good idea.
I have a lot of dinghies.
Anyone else?
I need help.
I just had a question that I put in the chat. I don't know if anyone saw it, but if there are any polars floating out there, I'd love to take a look at them for any of the marks, but Mark II specifically.
What was that, Hunter? Can you repeat
the polar numbers for the boat? If anyone has a copy of those, or if there's anything floating around, I haven't been able to find anything to that regard.
Robert, anything on the polars for? I know you have the pilot, but
yeah, Hunter,
B40?
if you apply U.S. Sailing, if you apply for the ORC club rating, there's a checkbox to add polar. And like I said, like right now, I'm having trouble because they don't have a Pilot 35 in the system, but they have B40s in the system. So you may be able to pull it that way by requesting an ORC. It may cost a little bit, but I believe they have the polars for most boats that they already have a club certificate for.
I think they do.
Great. Thanks so much, Robert. And I just want to really, truly thank Peter, Zahn. Truly thank you so much. And we're going to have you back next month. I want to thank David so much for sharing your insights and on setup with Spinnaker, ASIM, and just going through all that with us. We really appreciate it. Patrick, you're going through Catalina, and I just want to go, and I think half of us here on the call want to fly out to California and just crew out to Catalina on a B40 and just get that experience. That's
Well,
great.
just take his boat.
Oh yeah. We'll just take it.
I could have saved some money.
So truly appreciate that, Hunter. Your expertise in racing and sailing, and I mean we're going to want to keep. We hope you come back continually, and certainly you have 2 terms, so you have to come back next time. You have no choice. Certainly Mariana, who's not here, but we'll thank her, and Jeff, of course. Thank you, our Commodore, who made this all possible, and truly help appreciate his leadership. So that's it.
Okay.
Good job. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Hey,
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Fabulous.
Happy
Thank you all.
sailing. Enjoy.
Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.